Hello. So this is a video for Black History Month 2024. We're going to be talking about Octavia Butler's novel, The Parable of the Sower. Part of the reason that we're talking about The Parable of the Sower for this year, 2024, is that the first book of The Parable of the Sower, or the first portion of the book, is set in 2024. Personally, I'm quite glad that for most of us, the world of 2024 does not look the way that Butler sort of envisions in Parable of the Sower, because this is a dystopian novel. Certainly some people are facing similar kinds of conditions with the collapse of their societies, widespread chaos, destruction, death, violence, etc., etc. It's occurring right now in Gaza, for instance. Ukraine has been devastated by the war there. There's a number of other conflicts going on around the world. But those are in the context of military engagements, military conflicts. And what Butler envisions in this novel is a sort of general societal collapse in which things like environmental change, deregulation, rampant capitalism, drug use, particularly the creation of a drug called pyro, which makes people obsessed with fire, gang violence, the I don't want to say corruption of the police, because the police as they exist in the contemporary US are pretty corrupt and violent and inefficient, but basically the transition of the police into an all-out gang as such. All of these things have contributed to the basically disintegration of the United States. Some areas seem to be doing better. California, which is where Parable of the Sower is set, is basically sort of descended into a chaotic, impoverished hellscape, whereas Washington and Oregon supposedly are doing better, but it's hard to tell because the characters in the novel don't ever actually get there, even though they're moving north in the latter portion. So the novel is told from the perspective of Lauren Olenema. She starts out age 15. She's age 18 by the end of the novel. And she is an interesting character because, on the one hand, she is a young person. On the other hand, she is remarkably mature and has substantial forethought, planning, and philosophical or theological ideology that she develops. A big portion of the novel is the development of Earthseed, which is Lauren's new religion. What exactly... so we get small bits and pieces of Earthseed philosophy. What exactly it is, it's sort of a combination, and one of the characters compares it to this. It's a sort of combination of like Buddhist philosophy, existentialism, futurism, things like this. So the basic idea is that God is change. And this is not a God to be worshipped. This is simply a God that exists. This is a religion founded in the idea of facts, of things as they are. And so God is change because change is the inevitable, continual, eternal force of the universe. God can't be stopped, but God can be shaped, and God shapes us in turn. So The opening verse of the novel, which comes from Earthseed, the Books of the Living, the eventual collection that Lauren puts together. The opening verse of this novel, and one of the most important verses of Earthseed theology, is, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." And change is capitalized in each of those instances. So that's, I think, important on a micro signs level. So part of the idea of Earthseed is that humans have a responsibility to shape God, in the sense that because change is inevitable, you cannot stop change from happening, but you can shape what change may look like. You can prepare for particular eventualities. You can work together with others to build a better society, things like this. And so there's an ethical dimension to this. The goal is to grow, expand, and to improve the world around them. That is the objective of Earthseed. And the final destiny of Earthseed is space colonization. In the first portion of the novel, in the year 2024, before it gets on to 2025, 2026, etc., we get the last vestiges of the US space program, reports of an astronaut who has died on Mars, and rather than being buried on Mars the way she wanted to, the government insists that her body be brought home, back to Earth. And Lauren is really fascinated by this idea of space and the idea of colonizing other worlds, finding other planets where human beings could live, etc., etc. And she believes that is the ultimate destiny of Earthseed. That is the objective that human beings should shoot for. Now, the space program is dismantled by the new president, President Donner, who comes in. Interestingly enough, choice of name there. Donner, as in Donner Party, the cannibal travelers of 1848, who were forced by the grim necessities of survival to eat the other members of their party in order to stay alive. Donner gets elected president, and what it says here is, Donner has a plan for putting people back to work. He hopes to get laws changed, suspend overly restrictive minimum wage, environmental, and worker protection laws for those employers willing to take on homeless employees and provide them with training and adequate room and board. What's adequate, I wonder? A house or apartment, a room, a bed in a shared room, a barracks bed, space on a floor, space on the ground? What about people with big families? Won't they be seen as bad investments? Won't it make much more sense for companies to hire single people, childless couples, or at most, people with only 1 or 2 kids? I wonder. And what about those suspended laws? Will it be legal to poison, mutilate, or infect people as long as you provide them with food, water, and space to die? And so this is one of the elements of societal collapse in this novel. Governmental deregulation and the ability of corporations or whoever is the strongest to do what they want to do. This is, not to put too fine a point on it, kind of the world envisioned by Republicans. Not what they imagine will happen, but what would likely in reality happen, is a return to the Gilded Age and the horrific working conditions, environmental conditions, etc. of that era. Deregulation means a return to 16-hour work days, no worker protections. If you get injured on the job, you're out on the street, nothing you can do about it. It means rampant physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse within the workplace. It means that corporations dump toxic materials into public waterways, all of this stuff. And all of that has negative, detrimental societal effects. And that is essentially the world envisioned by pro-business Republicans. The fact that Butler wrote this in, I think, 1993, this originally came out. Copyright 93, is actually not that surprising because the 80s was the Reagan Revolution, and one of the elements of that revolution was rolling back regulations, which put us on the path we have been on basically up through Donald Trump. I mean, really, Biden is the first person who's tried to put in any significant regulations, worker protections, anything like that, since the 80s. So that's what's going on in this novel, is that it's societal collapse. You have, and we actually find out later in the novel that things are in a way even worse than Lauren envisions here in this early portion, because in the latter portion, after Lauren's neighborhood has been sort of invaded by these pyro drug addicts, and the houses have been burned, a lot of the people have been raped and murdered, and a lot of their stuff has been stolen. Lauren and a couple of other people escape, and they end up on the road going north, vaguely north, toward what they hope is more opportunities, or at least more accessible water in places like Oregon and Washington and Canada, even though they know that there are armed borders between the states and with Canada. And along the way, along this trip, they start picking up more and more people who sort of join into their group, and they eventually develop a reasonably large group of people with a number of children. Now, among the people that they pick up, 4 of them, 2 adults and 2 children, 2 separate pairs, one mother and daughter, one father and daughter, they had been wage slaves, basically. So you have the reemergence of the corporate town, or the company town, in which a company pays workers in scrip, which is actually a thing that some companies have tried to return to recently in the US. They pay in scrip. They pay less than it costs to afford your rent and company housing and buy your food in the company store. And so because workers are perpetually short of the money that they need in order to survive, they come to owe the company more. And you build up debt to the company, and you have to work that debt off. You cannot leave the company until your debt is paid off. And because you can't ever make enough to live, you can't ever pay off the debt always grows. And so essentially people are enslaved to the company. And because there are no regulations, people are regularly beaten, people are regularly raped, children are separated from their parents and often sold into prostitution or to work in other places. Companies can sell you to other companies, et cetera, et cetera. It is slavery in effect. And the people that they meet show the detrimental effects of this, because like with the first mother and daughter pairing of ex-slaves or escaped slaves that they pick up, when the group confronts them after this mother and daughter snuck into their camp, their reaction is to sort of roll up into little balls to minimize the negative impact of a beating, because that's what they assume they will experience based on their life working for this company. So we've got all of that stuff going on. As this group is walking north, they're faced with thieves, with would-be rapists, with arsonists. They have to escape a raging wildfire. They have to find fresh water. They have to deal with injuries and things like this. And all of this is made much more complicated for Lauren and actually for the two sets of escaped slaves because she has what's called hyperempathy syndrome. Basically, hyperempathy syndrome, she experiences the strong emotions felt by others, particularly pain and pleasure. So she gets to sort of doubly enjoy sex because she experiences the enjoyment of the other person in addition to her own. But a much more common experience for her is experiencing the pain of others. And so when they have to fight, when she has to shoot people, kill people, etc., she experiences that pain, that suffering, and that death. Like she physically feels what that person feels until they have died. So that makes it much, much more difficult to sort of successfully navigate this world. And yet, from that empathy, from that hyper empathy, and you can't sort of get away from the idea that Earthseed is rooted in that experience, this idea that humans have an ethical obligation to try and make the world better and to sort of expand beyond the narrow confines of this hellacious world in which Lauren finds herself in. You can't help but get a sense that that is somehow rooted in this experience of shared suffering, sharing the suffering of others.